You are now listening to Just Another Year Chicago with Nick Rohde and Ryan Chapman. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this Sunday's episode of Just Another Year Chicago. I am your host, Nick Rohde, and today we are talking about the Chicago Bears' victory over the Minnesota Vikings, 33-27. I'm still in shock. I know a lot of Bears fans are still in shock. What a game. What an ending. But we're going to jump into that in just a minute. But also today we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bears and how well they are also playing. Yes, well, even though it is the preseason, there's more to it than that. So more to come into that. And then a little bit about the U of I football program and their new head coach. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all content and follow me on Twitter at ChicagoNick, no K at the end, and let's chat sports. So today to kick off, the Chicago Bears beat the Minnesota Vikings 33-27 to the wire. A very intense, very offensive-driven game. Both defenses, the scores shows the defenses didn't play well. There was a lot of, deep pressure moments on these defenses, and it turned out really well. And Mitch Trubisky, David Montgomery, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and Cairo Santos all stepped up huge today. So let's jump into that. The Bears are still alive in the NFC playoff race. They are currently fighting for the seventh and final wild card spot with the Arizona Cardinals. This win over Minnesota was crucial, and let's make this very clear. The Minnesota Vikings lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, which was a crucial loss for them because the Chicago Bears beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few weeks back. Now, the Buccaneers have a much better record. They're sitting at 8-5 currently. Their game is just finishing up as we're recording this podcast. But the Bears beat them earlier in the season, which was huge. And the reason why is because that means that we own the tiebreaker over Minnesota. Since we lost to Minnesota a few weeks back at Soldier Field and beat them up in Minnesota, that's obviously a tiebreaker, and then the tiebreaker goes to the Chicago Bears because of Minnesota's loss to the Buccaneers and the Bears win to the Buccaneers. So that's huge. The fact that Minnesota literally is out of the playoffs now is a massive advantage for the Chicago Bears. They both played great games today, but now all the Bears need to do is win out, which they play the Jacksonville Jaguars that are currently sitting at 1-12, I believe 1-13 now on a 13-game losing streak, and beat the Green Bay Packers at Soldier Field with the Packers already in the playoffs, most likely going to rest starters in Week 17. Very big advantage. The Chicago Bears have a very good opportunity to make the playoffs still this year, and they have gone in the direction instead of tanking, which they could have done 2 weeks ago when they lost to the Detroit Lions. The Bears had to say to themselves, are we going to go to the playoffs, or are we going to lose out the rest of the season to get a first-round draft pick? And guess what? The Bears chose to go for the playoffs, and they're riding, this great offense that they suddenly have. Obviously with Bill Lazor calling the plays. We're going to jump all into that, but they are still alive. The Bears are in a great position. All we need is the Arizona Cardinals, who have a very tough schedule coming up, to lose one game. Now, one thing that everyone needs to know is that Matt Nagy is not the savior of this team. Matt Nagy put this team in the position where they had to fight for a playoff position, and the Bears should not even be sitting here. They have a very talented roster, which I'm going to hit on a little bit more in a little bit. But the Chicago Bears have an extremely talented roster, in my opinion, not just being a Bears fan. You can tell by the weapons. You can tell by what's going on here. There was a lot of questions around the offensive line and the quarterback position for a long time. But you have now one of the premier running backs in the NFL in David Montgomery. You have Allen Robinson, who's a top 5 wide receiver, and one of the hottest rookies in the NFL right now, Darnell Mooney, on the offensive side of the ball, with a completely revamped offensive line that I brought up a couple weeks ago on one of our first podcasts. This team is doing fantastic. And they were put in the position because Matt Nagy was calling plays, and Matt Nagy was trying too hard to control this team, and that is what put the Chicago Bears in a 6-game losing streak and in a very bad position moving to Nick Foles. But right now, what we need to worry about is that the Chicago Bears are potentially going to make the playoffs this year. So let's keep it going. Let's start with the offense in today's game. Mitch Trubisky has looked like a completely different quarterback since coming back into the starting role after he was benched in Atlanta in Week 3. Obviously, last couple of years, Mitch has not lived up to the expectations. He has been in a draft class with generational type players like Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes has obviously won a Super Bowl. Deshaun Watson is just a freak of nature, which he didn't play well against the Chicago Bears, which is great, but we'll get more. He plays on a horrible Houston Texans team that is just a mess as a franchise. But let's go back to Mitch really fast. He looks like a completely different quarterback, and that is huge for the Chicago Bears. And it makes decision making for the future a little bit easier, but there's still a couple questions that the Bears need to answer. Bill Lazor, who is the Bears' current offensive coordinator, is a guy that Mitch Trubisky needed, and he was brought to Chicago to help him, kind of grow into a more comfortable quarterback. But Matt Nagy was trying too hard to control, and this is kind of what I was getting at, was that Matt Nagy was calling the plays, and the offense just was not working. It wasn't. It had a horrible offensive line. It was running too many of the same play over and over again, weren't hitting proper targets, weren't being creative, and Bill Lazor has brought that, and he has helped open Mitchell Trubisky's potential, and that's huge for the Chicago Bears. So very happy to say that, the Bears are in better hands with Bill Lazor. Is he the answer? I don't know. But when you have David Montgomery having back-to-back 100-yard rushing games, Mitchell Trubisky looking like a completely different NFL quarterback, not elite, but good, and that's all the Bears needed with a championship-caliber defense. But he looked great today against the Minnesota Vikings with two very crucial mistakes, one being a red zone interception in the fourth quarter with only a few minutes left, but it ended up working out. The Chicago Bears won the game, and I just wanted to start off with Mitchell Trubisky. As a Bears fan who has talked poorly about you before, we are very proud of the progress that you have made. So thank you for a great game today. And that's point number one with the offense. Number two is David Montgomery is a whole new player since coming off his concussion protocol back halfway through the season. He is running over people. He is finding ways to get through this, through a now as a better offensive line, but he's breaking tackles. He's making yards. Entering today's game, in the last 3 games, he has averaged 8 yards a carry. That is absurd. It's almost a first down every single time he touches the ball. So this new offensive line with Sam Mustipher, Alec Bars, Whitehair at his proper position, even with Leno on the line, they are looking good, and they are looking good as a unit. It's the 4th consecutive game with this unit, and that's without a guy like James Daniels, who is a very good and young offensive guard in the NFL. So it's working for him. He's not running up the gut every time. He's breaking it to the outside. Holes are being opened if he does run it up the gut, which is very exciting. He had 2 really great rushing touchdowns today, one in the second quarter on the goal line, and then another one in the third quarter, which, by the way, the Bears are the worst offense in the third quarter in the NFL. But they were cooking today. David Montgomery had a huge touchdown run today. He ran his heart out. He ran for over 140 yards. Again, back-to-back 100-yard games, and his offensive line helped him out big time today. So shout out to the offensive line again. Sam Mustipher, I am your biggest fan right now. If you ever get to watch my podcast and comment, I would literally probably, scream like a little girl. But really, the Bears did great today. Very proud of them on the offensive side of the ball. But there are a few things. You have a guy like Cairo Santos, who I mentioned earlier, who is the MVP of the game, but I'll hit on that in a little bit. He's hit 22 field goals in a row. He is the best kicker the Bears have had since Robbie Gould. And it's working. The Bears have had a long search since getting rid of Robbie Gould, which they should have never gotten rid of, even though he did want a lot of money, but kickers are obviously precious in the NFL. And with Cairo Santos, we have found a guy to fill in his shoes. So, but what I'm getting at with the offense is that you can't just score 3 points every time. You cannot rely on him to hit 4 field goals today, which is absurd, which is absolutely absurd. Cairo Santos saved the day. That's why he's the MVP. But he hit 4 field goals, one being a total pressure kick in the fourth quarter to make sure that the Bears went up more than a field goal. Instead of just tying, they were up by 6, but obviously if Minnesota would have scored that Hail Mary touchdown at the end of the game, they would have lost. But, Cairo Santos did what he had to do. He went 4 for 4 today, extending his impressive streak to 22 field goals in a row, which is impressive by anybody. He has been really, really great the last couple of weeks, but the offense needs, when we get into the red zone or in a certain position, I would have preferred if Santos only had 2 field goals today, and there were 2 more touchdowns. But I'm going to count my blessings. The Chicago Bears won today, but the offense needs to make sure that they take advantage of the opportunities that they're given, especially against a quarterback that's only thrown, in Kirk Cousins, who has thrown 16 touchdowns over the last 5 games and only 2 interceptions. So an 8-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio over the last 5 games is very impressive. And then finally, I know David Montgomery was the big topic, Mitchell Trubisky, but I really love, and love's a weird word, but I love Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson in this offense. They work. They complement each other, because if Allen Robinson is being thrown to a lot, people have to guard him, and then you have another threat on the other side of the ball on Darnell Mooney. That's kind of what we were hoping with Anthony Miller, and it just unfortunately it's not working as well. Anthony Miller is a good ball player, but Darnell Mooney, the 5th-round pick out of Tulane this past year, and now is tied the Bears' rookie record with 45 receptions in their rookie season. He's just doing a great job. He's he's given an opportunity, he's taking advantage of it, and he had a touchdown. He had the first touchdown of the game today. And then Allen Robinson also. This guy is making sure he wants to stay in Chicago. You can see it in his body language. If Mitch Trubisky is his quarterback, he wants to stay in Chicago, and that's something that Bears fans should really be looking forward to. So I hope that the Bears re-sign him and give him a proper contract extension. Unfortunately, this year the Bears do have a lot of money already tied up, and next year they'll have much more flexibility in their cap. So I've already said this before. I think that what the Bears are going to do is they are going to franchise tag Allen Robinson. They'll be able to re-sign Mitch Trubisky because his numbers still aren't elite, so they can give him another prove-it contract, like a 2-year, $20 million, so $10 million a year, prove-it contract. The Bears could definitely do that, but with the franchise tag, it doesn't go against the cap, and the Bears can use that on Allen Robinson for a year, and then next year, if he has another great year again, the Bears can extend him. So super exciting to see this offense improving. There's still opportunity for improvement, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let's go to the defense really fast. I loved the aggressiveness today. The opening play was a sack on Kirk Cousins. And getting in Kirk Cousins' head early is key because he does not do well the second you're in his head. And he had a good game today. He did well overall. He kept the Vikings in it. He made smart play calls. But he was under pressure a lot of the game. I mean, he was sacked by Bilal Nichols, who is next man up of the year, in my opinion, stepping in for Eddie Goldman. But Bilal Nichols had a great game today. He got in Kirk Cousins' face a lot. But let's get to something really fast. Robert Quinn had a strip sack today that Cousins ended up recovering. But Robert Quinn made a lot of pressure on Kirk Cousins today. And that's a huge opportunity in order for them to, make sure this guy is actually worth his money. It opens up more opportunity for the rest of the defense. So overall, Robert Quinn had one big play today, but he was making pressure, which is great. Same with Khalil Mack. Akeem Hicks was in the backfield all over the place on multiple plays. So the front was just doing fantastic. They can't fall asleep, though. There was a lot of times in this. Again, they let up 27 points on the Minnesota Vikings, who have a lot of weapons on their offense. But overall, the defense fell asleep at moments. Chuck Pagano went back to more of a conservative kind of scheme, and it just really wasn't the best move, in a lot of our opinions, for the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are an aggressive defense. They have great playmakers. They did what they had to do, and they won the game, but they slept a little bit too much. And they were playing without Jalen Johnson, one of the best rookie corners in the league right now. I mean, Jalen Johnson was playing like a 5-year veteran, so very excited potential for him, but he was out today with a shoulder injury. And there was a couple penalties. There was a pass interference that was a little questionable on the Bears rookies today, but they definitely stepped up. Everyone was an X-man up today, and they did a great job. Pagano, again, cannot be too conservative with this defense. This defense was built by Ryan Pace for Vic Fangio in order to get in quarterback and be just in quarterbacks' heads all game. That's what he has right now. We need to keep this up, and Pagano needs to not be so conservative, especially at the end of the game like that. There was a couple plays where I believe the Vikings were 2nd and 19, and they gave up a 14-yard gain, and no one was around. So that can't happen. And in the second half, I don't know if the defense was tired. The defense has been off the field less than what they usually are, and they're not making the proper stops. So there was a huge stop today on 4th down. Later in the game, in the 4th, on Kirk Cousins, Brent Urban, who is my favorite free agent signing by the Chicago Bears in the last 2 years, got in Kirk's face. Kirk had to throw it up just to hopefully someone would catch it, and it went out of bounds. So that's huge. And, shout out Brent Urban. But again, I want to get to Bilal Nichols real fast. This guy came from a small college in South Dakota, and he has stepped up into Eddie Goldman's, who's arguably one of the best nose tackles in the NFL. A lot of people have forgot about him because he's one of the 2 Bears players this year that opted out of playing in the COVID season, and he has filled in perfectly. And I want to give Max Markham a quick shout-out. He made a great point on Twitter today. Imagine this Bears defensive line next year with Hicks, Bilal Nichols, and Eddie Goldman. That's going to be huge. And then you have Robert Quinn, Khalil Mack on the outsides. It's going to be a scary – I mean, the Bears' defensive front is scary now, but they're going to be even scarier later. But I want to get to the point that I was kind of getting about talent earlier. The Bears have a boatload of talent on this roster. And a lot of people go, no, I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball too. They have a young rookie tight end in Cole Kmet. They have a young rookie receiver in Darnell Mooney. They have Allen Robinson. They now have this crazy David Montgomery. They have an improving offensive line. And Mitch Trubisky, who can move his feet, or can move around in the pocket, make plays for himself. And the team has a lot of talent. But they're being head coached by someone who isn't anything more than a motivator, and which is key as a head coach. But if Nagy would have just given up his play calling right when things were going south and not tried to ride it out for a couple games, I think that this Bears team would be in a lot different position right now. They'd be fighting for the NFC North title. If Matt Nagy would have kept his play calling abilities or responsibilities, the Bears would have been out of it right after that Detroit game. They would have never been even in that game. Matt Nagy is not a good head coach, in my opinion. Even if the Bears make the playoffs this year, even if the Bears go deep into the playoffs somehow, which you never know with this roster. I mean, beating Minnesota is no easy challenge. Keeping Deshaun Watson, at ease is no easy task. But I don't see this team making it to the Super Bowl this year. The playoffs is great. It helps with, the pain that the Chicago Bears fans feel every 8 years and then they randomly make the playoffs. I don't think Matt Nagy is the guy, and he will be out the door. I think Pace will stay, but he'll be on the hot seat next year if they don't make the playoffs with their next head coach. Going on to that, the O-line is playing like one of the best units in the NFL. Not saying they are the best unit, but they're acting like it. They're making opportunities still for David Montgomery to be an elite running back, for Mitch Trubisky to make deep throws and accurate throws. The offensive line is doing that, and I still want the offensive line this offseason. I want Ryan Pace, if he's still the general manager, to go out and draft in the first round the best left tackle they can get their hands on, or trade up, a pick or two to get a top 10 pick while still making the playoffs this year. Trade up to get a good pick, get rid of Charles Leno, and draft a left tackle in this draft. Leno didn't have a terrible game today, but he's not the greatest left tackle in the league. The Bears need fresh. The Bears need young, and he's an older guy on the line. But you have Cody Whitehair, who now is a seasoned veteran. I think that that's what the Bears need to do this offseason. And what's nice is that the Bears, I don't think right now, and this is the biggest take of the day, the Bears do not need to go out and get a quarterback in the first round this upcoming draft. With how Mitch is playing under Bill Lazor, and if this offense keeps turning up, I don't think that the Bears should waste their first-round pick on a quarterback. Maybe their second- or third-round pick go out and get a quarterback, but somehow get rid of Foles. But the Bears don't need, I would love Zach Wilson on the roster just in case Mitch does start playing bad. But I think the Bears need to think, okay, we have enough talent here right now to still make a run. Let's get what we need, and Mitch is going to get us by like the punky QB in 1985. Just go out and do that. But Mitch could turn into an elite quarterback. You never know. So a lot of takes there for a lot of decisions to be made. Obviously not on the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. You have the weapons. It's the quarterback. You have quarterback and left tackle, who are two very important parts of the offensive side of the ball that the Bears need to come up with this season. So, in my opinion, I do not want the Bears to get rid of Mitch Trubisky. I want them to give him a prove-it contract this upcoming offseason, because they did decline his fifth-year option, which I think was the right decision because it lit a flame under him to get going. So one other thing was, I was not a fan of the Bears winning the coin toss today and choosing to start with the ball. I am always a big fan of starting with the ball in the second half, because you can potentially be ending the first half with the ball, and which the Bears did technically with a couple seconds left. But it's too much of a risk, and this offense isn't elite to do that, to have that move be like, okay, like I can go, my offense is 90% likely to score on the opening drive. So I did not like that decision by Matt Nagy either. But again, it's over with. The Bears won the game, and that's all that matters. So for Nagy to also say, and another thing on Matt Nagy is for him to see what happens when you believe in yourself. Dude, to Mitchell Trubisky in the locker room at halftime, according to the reporters, dude, you were the problem for Mitch Trubisky. You put all the blame on him for your bad offense. It was not Mitch Trubisky. It was obviously you and your play calling, not letting him come to his full potential. And that's another reason why Matt Nagy needs to go, because he blames his players over himself. And sometimes he'll take the heat, but does he act like he really cares? No. And quick shout out to Cairo Santos again. 22 kicks in a row. He's the MVP of the day in my book. This man is going to be the Bears kicker for hopefully a long time. Hopefully we can re-sign him this offseason to a couple. It's risky with kickers because kickers can get emotional. They can get in their own heads. So got to be careful with that. I would give Cairo Santos an extension, pay him a little bit more money for what he's worth. But to end all that, again, the Bears won today 33-27 in Minnesota. They are 7-7. They are back to 500 on a 2-game winning streak. And the Bears are back in the very, very much in the playoff hunt. All we need, if Arizona can lose, we're in the driver's seat. We're going to be good to go. We just need to win out against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who we play in Jacksonville, our last away game of the regular season, who, again, are on a 13-game losing streak. But shout out to my man James Robinson from Illinois State, who is just ripping up the league and making a point for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he deserves it, undrafted from a small D1 school. James Robinson, you're the man. I like you a lot. Roll birds on you, man. Best of luck. But the Bears should win next week in Jacksonville, but you can't get overconfident. I don't want the Bears to do that. So I want the Bears to walk in there like it's the playoffs again, win that game, and then enter Green Bay at 8-7, going for 9-7, and locking up a playoff spot. So with that, we're going to move to the congrats to the Chicago Bears, but now we're going to move to the Chicago Bulls very quickly. They finished their preseason at 3-1, ending it on a 3-game winning streak. So they lost their first game to the Houston Rockets, who obviously have one of the best players in the league, James Harden. And then they went to Oklahoma City, where it's a younger roster, not terrible, but not what they were when Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden were there back in the early 2010s. And obviously with Chris Paul and Steven Adams not on the roster anymore either, they are not that elite status. So the Bulls team looks like they're in for making a playoff run, which is exciting because you have the Bears that are making a playoff run, but also the Bulls, who are playing in a shortened COVID season at 72 games, have a very good shot at making the playoffs this year with how this team is playing. They look good. They flow. They talk to each other. They like their head coach, which is a huge thing. So they're playoff hopeful. Absolutely. I think the Chicago Bulls will make the playoffs this year. I had a discussion last night with my girlfriend's dad, and he doesn't think so. I think so. I think this Bulls roster now has the coach that can open up its potential. So I think they're playoff hopeful for sure. Are they championship contenders? Sure. Anyone is if you make the playoffs. The playoffs are a completely different time, but they're not locked in like the Bucks and Lakers. They don't have that elite player like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo. They don't. So I think that the Bulls are in the right direction. They'll make the playoffs this year. They might win a game or two. Will they get bounced in the first round? Potentially. But who knows? They can make it to the second round. But I really do like the Chicago Bulls roster. People need to understand also that this preseason meant more than any preseason in NBA history, in any sports history. They were the first team. They were in the middle of a season when they got locked out. 9 months of no basketball against anyone but themselves. These guys want to learn how to play with each other. They want to learn how to play the game in a whole new and awesome way. And they're balling out right now. Zach Levine looks absolutely fantastic. He's looking more and more like an all-star every day. His shooting is fantastic. His defense has gotten really, really improved this offseason. Way to keep it up and look better every single game, Zach. I'm a huge fan. Best of luck to you. You got robbed of being an all-star reserve. I don't think you were a starter last year, but you definitely earned that reserve spot. But if you play the way you have, I think that you have a very good shot at making the all-star game this year. And then kind of going into Kobe White and Patrick Williams, the young guys of the Chicago, young guys, when you have Zach Levine, who's 24 years old, he's considered the veteran of that starting group with, Otto Porter Jr., I'll get to that in a second, but Zach is considered the oldest starter on the Chicago Bulls, which is pretty awesome at 24 years old. Kobe White and Patrick Williams are stepping up super well. Both players are looking good. They're individually and together individually when they're on the court without each other, but when they're also together on the court, they look good. They communicate with each other. A lot of people don't know this, but they were friends before college. Kobe White welcomed him with open arms and even said, "You Bulls fans, you should be super excited about this pick." And a lot of people are excited about Kobe White. I mean, he balled out this preseason. So really, really excited to see both those young guys, our last two first-round picks, are gelling together, and that's a big goal for them. Three players that do need to step up, though, is Lauri Markkanen, Wendell Carter, and Otto Porter Jr. Lauri Markkanen is currently trying to get a contract extension with the Chicago Bulls, which is great. It's great to see that you want to stay with the organization, but you have been injury-prone for the last couple seasons. What's weird is that he's 23 years old. He's only 2 months younger than me. So he's been in the NBA for 4 or 5 years now, and I think he's a really good player. I like Lauri Markkanen a lot. He kind of reminds a lot of people of Dirk Nowitzki, but he's injured a lot. Some decisions are questionable. He put on a lot of muscle to try to be more of a bully down in the paint, and that's something that he needs to do. So he needs to step up and be a bully. He needs to make sure he's getting, good looks, good plays, and being another threat on offense to open up other guys like Kobe White and Zach Levine. Wendell Carter, he needs to be more aggressive, which he is, but he's missing a lot of his opportunities. So I would like to see him. He's also been on the injury bug too. So hopefully Wendell Carter can step up, but he needs to play more aggressive. He needs to be the guy that we got from Duke. And then finally, Otto Porter Jr. I know a lot of people know that I really don't like Otto Porter Jr. I thought it was a bad trade for the Bulls. I also think that he doesn't really care to be a part of this organization, even though he says it. He's supposed to be a leader. He's one of the older guys. He's still in his 20s. But he makes a lot of money. He makes $28 million this season. Huge hurt on the cap to go out and get a free agent. But I don't know. I need to see Otto Porter step up. And if he were to be put down as a six-man, be the best six-man of the year, man. Like, earn your money, earn the Bulls fans back. A lot of people are disappointed with his play here. So I really like the Chicago Bulls starting five with Zach Levine, Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter Jr. I think that it's a good young core. They can make the playoffs with how they're playing in the preseason. Hopefully it carries over to the regular season, obviously, but you never know. And I see it kind of feels like the Blackhawks back in like 2008, 2009 when they're really, young and gelling and like, oh crap, these guys are going to be really good. Kind of feels that way at the United Center, but with the other team that plays there. So you never know. Stay tuned for that. But I am putting in my season prediction right now for the Chicago Bulls. I got them at 38-34. Again, it's a 72-game season due to COVID and entering between a 6th and an 8th playoff seed. So best of luck to Chicago Bulls. Very excited for them to start opening night on December 22nd, I believe, against the Atlanta Hawks. So stay tuned for that. And then moving into very quickly, U of I football. U of I football and Lovie Smith have parted ways. He was fired, but parted ways obviously sounds a lot better. And they hired New York Giants linebacker coach Brett Bielema. Now, I probably botched that, but again, not a football guy, not a college football guy. He coached in the Big Ten before. He coached Wisconsin's team from 2006 to 2012, and then was the head coach of the University of Arkansas from 2013 to 2017 before jumping to the NFL, where he obviously now has come back to the Big Ten, because Arkansas is not in the Big Ten, Wisconsin is. But overall, best of luck to U of I. I know they've had a lot of rough years with their football program, but hopefully there's a better direction. But best of luck to Lovie Smith. He is my favorite Bears coach of all time. He's been the only good coach of my Bears time besides Vic Fangio. Again, I don't think Matt Nagy's a good coach, but best of luck to you, Coach. Thank you for all the fun memories. I know you had something starting to go at U of I, but unfortunately, it's cutthroat out there, and U of I wants a winner sooner than later. So, sorry, but there's really no big news for the Cubs, Sox, or Blackhawks to report on. But we hope by next Wednesday's episode that there will be. So, just to make sure, please make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChicagoNick. You can also follow us on Instagram at Just Another Year Chicago. Or make sure that you hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay up to date, because we are wrapping up this episode. So please, again, hit the subscribe button, stay up to date with us. Follow us on all of our social media channels. Let's talk sports. And make sure that you comment on this video. Let's chat on YouTube too. I'm all about it, because for some reason on Twitter, I got banned for 3 days from tweeting too much. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. Super great to have another conversation about Chicago sports. Big Bears win, bear down. We need another big win for the rest of the season. The playoffs started this week for the Chicago Bears, just to make sure everyone knows. So, again, huge win for the Chicago Bears. Very proud of this team. Way to go to be a division rival at their home with the playoffs on the line. So, with that, thank you all again. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will talk to you guys on Wednesday. Have a good night, guys. Thank you again for listening in to Just Another Year Chicago with Nick Rohde and Ryan Chapman. We'll see you guys next time.